Hello and welcome to the inaugural edition of my podcast, my webcast. My name is Brian and I will be here with you for the next little bit. I don't know how long I'm going to let this go. Probably like an hour or something. It's a podcast, I think it deserves an hour. But this is my first time trying, and I'm trying out some new audio editing stuff. And I just want to give a couple shout outs. That track that you heard, a little segment of a track that I hijacked, was from Z-Sonic, a little drum and bass mix that he made. That sounds like some acid jazz to me, kind of, but I could be wrong. I could be proven wrong. But that is Z-Sonic. Look him up, check him out online, and he will blow your brains out with some funky beats, and that's what you need. So get some. And I'll give a little shout out to this free editing program I got. It's called Music Editor Free, and it's freeware. It's got some functionality. I've messed around with a couple things, and this is not bad. So for freeware, I'm not sure how they're making their money on freeware, but I'm glad they're doing it. So that's a shout out to them. Thanks, guys. And I don't have too many commercials. I'll give a shout out to Alex Stone Brewery. Check those guys out, man. They make some good ales. And if you're into that sort of thing, and to drink some crappy beer, there's no point in that. It's not good for you. Stone Brewery is good for you. I'm not a doctor, but I'm going to tell you that right now. Okay, so that's all my commercials. It's all the commercials I got for you. And let me just move right along here. So this is my first attempt, really, at making a podcast. I listened to a lot of online podcasts and stuff like that, some alternative media. I listen to Joe Rogan. He's got an awesome podcast. I love listening to Joe Rogan. He gets some great guests on. Kevin Smith has a podcast, which I'm just starting to listen to. I love Kevin Smith, man. The movies and also the talks and stuff that he's done. Real inspiration. All the stuff is very inspirational to me. Just hearing these guys, they're in my space. They're in my head. They're changing my perceptions, and I want to get on par with that. I want to throw my hat in the ring and give it a try. And of course, Alex Jones. I listen to his radio broadcast. So here it is. Here's me online now in the internet sphere, just getting right up in your headpiece. And and honestly, the impetus behind me doing this was I was just listening to the Joe Rogan podcast he did with Duncan Trussell, and I was listening to it yesterday. And they were commenting on, people will, I think it's probably a common thing for people to say, they have a hard time finding, people that are on the same level as them, or who want to talk about the same things, or things that interest them. And sometimes that can be hard to find. And what they were saying was, if you can't find, that group or people or that program, or you're not finding things you like, just go ahead and make it. Just make it yourself, and you'll start gathering those people around you, I guess is the way to put it. So as I continue doing this over the next weeks, months, years, the program will expand. I'll get a little better. Check me out next week, next year. I'll get better, and I'll have. I know a lot of interesting people, filmmakers, musicians, very intelligent people, free thinkers, people with a lot of life experiences, and I'm going to get those guys on, and we'll have some conversations right out here in the open, and see if we can open up some minds, open up our own minds, and just the art of making something, I think, is amazing. We have all this power today, and it's come upon us so quickly. I think that it's easy to overlook just exactly how much power we have to express ourselves now. And it's kind of obvious on the face of it. Yeah, we can get on the internet and connect with people all around the world. But like I said, it's really happened so quickly that I think the magnitude of it has just gone over people's heads. It's gone over my head, and I think a lot about this stuff. But I'm not the type of guy to criticize, be a critic, without trying something myself. And this is me trying. I expect it to I enjoy it actually for the 5 minutes that I've been doing it starting today. and I'm excited about where it can go because, even if just one person listened to this and thought that it was cool, and inspired them in some way to maybe try something on their own, or if something I say makes you want to look it up and think about it, whether you agree with me or not, then it's 100% worth it. Even just for that one person, that one time, that 1 hour, 1 minute that they heard something. Just if affecting people is, like I said, it's incredible. It really is. So that's what I'm doing here. That's why I'm doing it. And I have a lot of things to say. And people who know me personally know that if you get me started on some subject that I'm really interested in, I just go and go for hours and hours, days, weeks. Some of these topics deserve like weeks worth of treatment, in my opinion. Some of the things I think about, some of the things I hear other people talking about. And I'm not going to give you weeks worth of treatment on anything here today, but as the weeks go on, I guess I could say that I did that. And so that's great. Thanks for listening, by the way. Really appreciate it. Even though I can't see you, I can feel you right here, son. I feel you in my heart. I'm touching my heart, my chest, the outside of my heart. I'm feeling you, son. So, like I said, thanks. I'm going to get into, and I don't even really have any preset topic here. I thought I might just introduce myself, hear my voice, hear what my voice sounds like. Joe Rogan, I was listening to him. He said one of the great things about having a podcast is you can listen to how annoying you are when you play it back. And I tried this a couple times, spent a couple minutes trying to get my mix down. And one thing I've noticed right off the bat, and I'll apologize for this right here. I say a lot, like and that's a verbal tick. People have them. It's like saying like. Or something like that. And I think that I do that because in a one-to-one conversation where I can see somebody's face, I can see if they're nodding or kind of shaking their head when I say, and get a sense of whether or not they know what the hell I'm talking about. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm talking about. And it becomes obvious when people start shaking their heads like, the hell are you talking about? That's not as helpful when I'm pre-recording something and putting it out on the internet. So that's a little verbal tick I'm going to have to work on. Okay, so let's get into some meat here. Enough of the intro crap. Let's start at the beginning, right? A very good place to start, as they said in The Sound of Music. I think it was. And the beginning of our universe, according to a widely accepted theory, the Big Bang. Where apparently everything in our universe exploded from nothing, from a single point, and then expanded into the universe that we know. And I'd like to, most people understand basically kind of what that means, and I'd just like to, explore an alternate viewpoint that I heard Terence McKenna talking about. And Terence McKenna, if you know me, and you'll learn this as time goes on, is one of my favorite speakers, one of my favorite people, and he talked about eschatology as a possible alternative. And I don't believe that an eschatology necessarily contradicts with the Big Bang Theory per se. An eschatology basically is a science or a term or a philosophy in which everything is building up to a grand final moment, right? And this was widely accepted, before the Renaissance, at the beginning of the Renaissance, and then as the scientific revolution kind of got going, it was fairly well abandoned and pretty much forgotten for a long time. Until really, I wasn't around then, but until I heard Terence McKenna talking about it, I was unaware of the concept. And I think it has some merit because it does answer some basic questions, some possible flaws with just this Big Bang Theory, where everything came out of nothing. Basically, the idea behind this is that we're essentially living through time backwards. In essence, what happened was, not everything was one thing and then blew up and expanded, leading to a possible big crunch or a thermodynamic death of the universe as things expand. that there was and is some sort of energy, some sort of being that was all the things that we know, that exists, that has exploded outwards to really the outer reaches of black nothing, of space, has exploded out completely to the edges and is now in the process of returning back to itself. Now, everything has been flung out to the edges and is flowing back to the middle, just like water that splashed up on a hill, and it's now all experiencing itself running down the hill, and then eventually will all reconglomerate in the ocean of awareness or energy. And I think it's a really interesting theory, because, like Terence McKenna said, with the Big Bang, theorists, people who are just totally into this is how it happened and this is what I believe, essentially what they're saying is that at the beginning there was nothing, and then out of nothing, for no reason, everything just was created in a moment, an instant. And like he says, that's essentially the limit tests of credulity. If you can believe that, you can pretty much believe anything, right? That nothing existed, and all of a sudden, for no reason, everything existed. And that is, when you put it that way, it is kind of difficult to grasp. It's also difficult to grasp that everything of all possibility existed and has existed forever. But, like he said, science needs something to start with. We need a first cause somewhere in our logical chain. And we don't have access to that first cause. We don't know it. We can't see it. We don't have a recording of it. We didn't experience it. So like he said, if science gets this one freebie, they're saying, give us this freebie, this Big Bang, and if you can give us that, we can explain everything from there. And his response was, well, if you get one freebie, then I guess everybody should probably get one freebie. And here's one. That everything did exist, has existed infinitely, and has expanded out. And so essentially what this is trying to tell us is that we're living backwards through time in a certain sense, because we've already been flung out and we're coming back to the center. I just think it's interesting. I don't have any axe to grind here. I'm not telling you it's the truth, but I do think it's an interesting alternative view to the way people normally perceive things. I think it's something worth thinking about. I'm just presenting it here to you. So there's just like an interesting, is it this or is it that type of thing? We don't know. Maybe we'll figure it out. Maybe it'll be 2012. Maybe it'll be 2013. Maybe it'll be the moment that we die, or maybe some moment, millennia, millions of years from now, as we return to greater awareness. But I do see that the universe does tend to give itself to increasing complexity. I don't think anybody really has any beef with that idea. We see it in the cooling of the universe as it created, hydrogen, helium, carbon, etc. down the line. It's an increasing complexity, and then you have the various types of physics giving way to chemistry, giving way to biology, giving way to societies and consciousness and technology. It does seem that things are becoming more complex. It's really hard to argue against that, in my opinion. So here's just an alternate view of how and why things are becoming more complex, is because, well, things are joining back together. All the little droplets are coming together and forming bigger pools, which by definition have more complexity. And there you go. So I said I want to start at the beginning. This is my first podcast. That's maybe 2 concepts of the beginning of all things that we conceive of. Okay, interesting. So let's bring things back to a ground level, something that we can all experience and understand through our daily lives. Something that's not the Big Bang or an eschatology theory of some sort, but like our lived experience. And it's difficult to speak about that without talking about, society as a whole in general. Society, of course, includes, our technology, our governments, our corporations, which, of course, is difficult to take out of the equation. And here I'd like to get into some more controversial territory, as if eschatology is not controversial enough. It's not for me, although it may be more controversial than what I'm going to say. I don't think it will seem as such to people. And so I'll just come straight out and say it. I am an anarchist. Philosophically, I'm an anarchist. Functionally, I'm an anarchist in as much as certain things in my daily life I choose to do without being told to do them. And I've written at least one article about this that's accessible. Anarchy essentially means no ruler. All right, so if I decide to, say, eat a piece of pizza over a steak, well, that's an anarchist decision I made. Nobody told me to do this or that. I just chose it on my own based on what I thought would be best, moral to me, better for me, whatever. And people live in that state more than, and I know there are a lot of states out there say, oh, you're an anarchist, click off. Those people aren't listening to me speak right now. As soon as I said the word anarchy, they turned this off. I'm guessing that you'll at least listen to my, reasoning behind this. And like I just said, there are, hundreds, dozens, thousands, I don't know, per day of little anarchist decisions that you make. Like I said, what you choose to eat, well, that's anarchy. The government didn't tell you what to eat. There's no ruler telling you. And here I need to give a shout out to Stefan Molyneux. Stefan Molyneux, STEFAN-MOLENEUX, I believe. freedomainradio.com, .net, but you can find him. Stefan Molyneux, Free Domain Radio. He is a philosopher who lives up in Canada, if I'm not mistaken, and he also has a podcast, and he's done like several hundred. He may have done his like 1,000th podcast. He's literally the most popular philosophy podcast ever to exist on this planet, as far as I'm aware, at least in the past 10,000 years. So, and he is anarchist by definition, and I want to give his definition of anarchy, or at least what the state is. And Stefan Molyneux says he had come up with a definition, which I believe is very accurate, that the state or a government is the social mechanism which claims a monopoly on the imposition of force in a geographic area. And we say imposition of force because we want to differentiate that between just self-defense. So if you come to me and you want to punch me in the face, and I dodge or block or you miss, and then I punch you back to stop the assault. Well, that's not an imposition of force. It's a self-defense role that I've entered into. I didn't come to your house and attack you. You came to me and I defended myself. So we say imposition of force to differentiate that. I am not a pacifist in that sense, although I have been a fighter for a long time, and most of the time, if it's not life-threatening, I would prefer to let somebody punch me where it's not actually life-threatening or super dangerous, just to diffuse the situation. I find that just functionally it makes my life easier. But like I said, I'm not a pacifist, and I'm not here to tell people what or what not to do. Although I will say that I do not believe that imposing your force upon somebody is a good thing. I guess I would say that I would suggest people not to do that. Well, I would never suggest people not to defend themselves. That's a personal choice, right? So anarchism, basically, anarchy means no ruler, right? If you look at what the definition of the word is, it means no ruler. And anarchist decisions are things that happen to everybody every day. And, I know a lot of statists will really recoil from me bringing up this topic, but I'm not speaking to them because as soon as they heard me bring up the word anarchy, they pushed stop as fast as they could, right? They do not want to hear this, and, that's their choice. It's fine. I'm not trying to impose this thing upon them. What's unfortunate is that the state is, trying to impose itself on me. And so, just to give a real basic example of the monopoly of an imposition of force. The government, right, takes your taxes, right? They take it maybe right out of your paycheck. They take it at the store, right? And if you do not pay those, they have certain regulations on what you can and cannot eat, what you can and cannot possess, etc. And if you break that set of rules that they've decided, and they'll feel no moral remorse at jailing you, taking some of your money in a fine, even shooting you, even killing you if you resist, because obviously they have the monopoly on force. Now the difference between that and your neighbor or yourself is that I can't come to you and do that. I cannot come to your house and say, well, I need 30% of everything you own because I have this really good idea and I'm really smart, or I'm really strong and I have really strong friends and smart friends, and we've come up with this idea that's going to be great, and whether or not you understand that at all, we're taking half your stuff or a third of your stuff or whatever it is. I'm not allowed to do that to you, right? So if I said, hey, I think we need new roads. I'm your neighbor. I think these roads that we have are full of potholes, and I need to make some new roads because it's going to be in the interest of everybody in our neighborhood. But you don't really have an option on that. We're going to take 30% of your stuff or whatever, and we're going to use that revenue to build this thing that we say is going to be in your best interest. It may or may not be. Time always tells. Not everything that seems like a good idea is, right? And another thing upon that, right on that line, is that you don't, as a person who lives in a certain area, have an option to say no to that, right? You can't say, well, I don't need police protection. I'm tough enough, or I have my own guns, and I don't want any police protection. Someone can come murder me and they won't even get arrested. That's fine. I'll protect myself. So therefore, I don't want to give you any of my money because I don't need what you're giving me. You're not allowed to say that, right? Even if you wanted to, you can't say, well, I don't need any roads. Like I'm an inventor, like this Japanese guy, right? And I read this a month or so ago. This Japanese guy invented a personal helicopter. It's kind of like a jetpack, but it has a helicopter rotor on top. And you say, well, I don't need any new roads. I don't need roads. I'm an inventor, and I invented this personal helicopter. So screw the roads. I don't need to give you any money for it. Go get it from somebody who wants to use them. Well, you don't really have that option, right? It's a monopoly. So why exactly is it then that nobody has this opt-out option? Well, that's the geographic location part of the definition there. You're under the protection because you're in this certain area and there is no escape. Now, I have my own little theory on this, and I've been thinking about this for a long time. I'm 31. I'll be 32 right at the end of this year. And I've probably been thinking on this for, I don't know, since I was 17, 18, maybe 19, and I started doing a lot of my own research, studying philosophy more in depth and things like that. So, like I said, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I believe that the reason that you don't have this opt-out option is because, well, as soon as you try it, you'll find out, you may seem to get some benefits from the level of taxation that you're spending. You can't say that you're getting no benefit from it, obviously. I mean, we drive on the roads and stuff, whether or not we want to. However, I do not feel, and I've done a little math on this, that you're getting what you pay for, pretty much. And you can do your own math on this, but I believe that the average amount that your average American pays to some sort of tax, some sort of fee, some sort of mandatory insurance is somewhere around 60 to 70% when you really get down to it. And just imagine how much you could do even if it was only 50%, which would be very lenient. Since about 33% comes straight out of your paycheck, and then at least 7% goes into anything you buy. That's 37% right there, and then we're just starting the tally. So if you had twice as much money as you had right now, just imagine all the things you could do, right? And that's exactly why, because because you would find, and I think people would find, that the place with the most amount of liberty, with the least amount of rules, the least amount of force, the least amount of taxes, would become the most successful. And I'll argue that that's essentially what happened in the United States. Right? We had this Constitution, which I actually heard somebody on the Alex Jones show make a comment that I had never heard before that I thought was really good. I'm not sure if I agree with it 100%, but this guy was saying that the Second Amendment was essentially the attempt of this document, or the writers and the founders, to take the monopoly on force out of the hands of the government. Now, that's really interesting. I will say this. I do not believe that just because you have the right to own a firearm, you have the right to impose your force. And so there, I think he was wrong. But I will say this, that by codifying this ability to have and use force, even if not to impose it, created a more free environment in the United States. And of course, the right to bear arms doesn't just mean firearms. It means a hatchet, a sword, a knife, or whatever it is that you may feel that you need to protect yourself from whatever. Generally other people, since we're the top predator. We don't really have to protect ourselves against saber-toothed tigers or anything like that. It's mostly for protection against other people, right? But could be for any reason. But in any case, this kind of diffusion of the ability to have force did create a more free society in America. And as a result of that, we became very prosperous. And we were that way in America as Americans, I assume, since I wasn't there, but this is what I hear, for a long time. We became the most educated, the most industrious, the most scientifically forward-thinking nation, right? Group of people. And slowly that's dwindled away, but that's neither here nor there, because that is really a result of having this state, right, which claims the monopoly on this imposition of force. And I would say, and as Stefan Molyneux said, and I think is a very good argument, that we need to start from first principles, because everybody would like to say, well, if everything was my way, it would be better. Of course, that's not true, because everybody has faults and things, that certain levels of ignorance, and of course I'm included. Everybody's included in that. But the first cause is this first principle that Stefan Molyneux would like to talk about is to cause no harm. Right? So if I'm sitting in my house doing something that's harming no one, I should have every right to do that. And if I decide to get up out of my own personal space and into somebody else's space and hurt them, take what they have, harm them, injure their property, which causes them harm, makes it difficult for them to provide for themselves. And these are bad things, right? Every kindergartner learns, don't hit, don't steal. And we accept these things at a personal level. But we make this mental leap to say, well, at a personal level, I shouldn't just forcefully take everything I desire. However, this social institution over here should have that right, and I justify that by saying, well, people are bad, right? People are naturally immoral, and without this threat of some external force that's going to come hurt them, that people will just run rampant, steal and rape and kill and do everything that they just naturally are going to do because they're bad people. And I don't know who I've heard. I'm sure Stefan Molyneux's made this argument, but I've seen other people make it, and I agree with it myself, to say, well, if you're going to say that people are inherently evil, people are inherently violent or whatnot, then government is actually the worst possible solution, because governments can only be run by people. People write the rules, people enforce the rules, people decide whether or not to follow the rules. And so if people are really this bad, that they're just going to run around killing and raping and stealing everything, then creating a system which can only be run by people, but which has much, much greater power to impose force, I guess I should say, really is kind of the antithesis of what you're saying there. You're saying that people are not to be trusted and evil. And, well, if that's the case, then we probably shouldn't make some institution run by people, interpreted by people, who have the power of force of millions of people, right? But are only run by a few. That's my own little personal argument, and there it is. And I think that's difficult to argue, although people do argue this quite a bit. I still think that it's illogical to say that if people are this bad, then we should design some system which conglomerates force which a few people will wield. Like I say, that just seems logically inconsistent to me. Okay, so let's take it away from the political talk, which I know is difficult for a lot of people, and it's difficult to talk about whether you agree or disagree. Of course, if I'm just talking to people that agree with me, it's great. I'm preaching to the choir, and it's fine. But let's take it away from there, and talk about something that I think is interesting, also controversial, and you'll probably notice as the weeks go on and these podcasts continue that a lot of what I want to talk about is somewhat controversial. And the reason for that is because controversial things are interesting, right? If everybody agrees on it, it's almost not worth talking about. Like, it's kind of like discussing the weather. You go outside and it's rainy, you say, oh, what a rainy day, Or if it's super hot like it's been this summer, oh man, can you stand this heat? Well, that's, it's something you can say, but it's pretty much, it's a kind of a non-issue, right? So let's talk about this. This is something I'm very interested in, something that I actually studied when I was in college. I went to the University of Missouri and studied architecture. And, well, I guess I can't say that I studied this while I was in college, because I did not take any classes on prehistoric architecture, but it's one of the things I'm very interested in. So over the past, I don't know, call it 50 years, there have been a lot of very interesting discoveries about these ancient megalithic building sites, right? You find them underneath the oceans a lot of times. You find them all around the earth. You're talking about pyramids, buried pyramids, things like Stonehenge. Of course, I don't know that Stonehenge isn't really megalithic, but there are a lot of these ancient sites, right, that are built, and I find it completely fascinating to discover this stuff. And just recently, actually, as I really considered it, a lot of these sites are underwater. And there may be a lot of reasons for that. In many cultures, they talk about this great deluge, this flood. They call these ancient civilizations antediluvian, or pre-deluge, essentially, before the world was flooded. Antediluvian civilizations. So I thought, everything that existed when I was born seems very normal to me, right? There were computers as long as I can remember. There were always such things like scuba gear and space travel, and I know that some of these things, like the internet and like deep space telescopes, those are pretty modern, and I can see that. But it never really occurred to me at my age that things like scuba are actually really modern. And I guess it was Jacques Cousteau who came up with the aqualung, and I don't know exactly when that happened. It was a while ago, but it wasn't that long ago. I should probably look this up before I start spouting out dates, but I don't think it was more than 50, 60, 70 years ago that our modern societies had access to some of the deeper levels of what was hiding under the ocean. And the oceans, that by itself is another really super interesting topic. I'm not going to get into it right here, but I mean, we've been on the surface of the moon, on the surface of Mars, and we still haven't figured out how to get to the bottom of the Marianas Trench. Right? It's here on our planet. and it's a mystery, and we're discovering these new kind of life forms, kind of anaerobic life forms that that feed off sulfur and the sulfur vents, and we're discovering these things all the time, right? Because it's fairly new. Right? We haven't actually had the technology to get down there and take a look for very long at all. I mean, imagine. And there may be people listening right now, and if there aren't, there are people alive and people in your neighborhoods and cities that were around before scuba gear was. There was no aqualung, So because we've had these advances in technology, we've been able to kind of expand our view of the world. And just off the coasts of Japan and off the coast of Cuba, people have found, and I've seen photographs and read articles about these what are apparently and fairly obviously structures, like human-built structures, we imagine, right? Because we're humans on this planet. And they're probably built by humans. I'm not gonna. I mean, it's Occam's razor right there. The simplest answer is the truest, right? So we see all these structures that are built not only on the land, but off the coasts of these islands, and they really defy the currently accepted views of what human history is, because we don't have any records of any civilizations that had the capability to build these types of structures. I mean, and I can't think of the name right now, but there's a structure that a Roman temple is built on top of that. Correct me if I'm wrong, email me or shoot me a tweet or something. I believe that at least some of these stones are like 1,000 tons. It's really ridiculous. It would be difficult even by today's standards. So we have evidence here, and this is very scientific stuff. We're not talking about eschatology here. We're not talking anarchism versus statism types of things. We're talking about physical, observable things that you can photograph and discover these things that really defy the modern view of what history is. So we have these structures that are built. That's not debated. We see some of them are debated. Some people, some scientists would like to say that, well, some of these underwater things, especially, well, they're possibly naturally created, and it's really a difficult position to argue, because some of them clearly aren't. You do not see a lot of straight lines and right angles in nature, especially not on these large scales. We also have these like mounds that you can only see what the pictures are, like in South America. You can only interpret these mounds when you fly over them, and then they look like large pictures of animals and things. And it's easy to say, oh well, there's these ancient savages that decided to build this, and well, for no reason, right? But I really have a hard time believing that these humans, and they were modern humans to all intents and purposes, were so illogical as to build these things that can only be seen from air, with no reason whatsoever to build things that can be seen by a flyby. Like, people aren't that stupid that they're going to spend whole lives and civilizations building things that really cannot and have no way of being apprehended by any method that they've ever known about. And these are just a couple of examples of kind of ancient architectural history, kind of this ancient architecture that like I say, defies the logic of our current understandings. Now, it does make sense, however, because we do have records, however kind of poor you might think they are. There are worldwide records of this gigantic flood. And we know that the Earth changes and moves. We all know the theory of plate tectonics and that continents drift and things change. And we also can see from our modern society how many how many cities and civilizations are built near coastlines. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which are pretty obvious. Fishing and transportation and things like that. And that's the way it is today. It's very likely that's how things were in days past. And so it's really not surprising, if you think of it that way, to find that there are ruins from apparently advanced cultures which could do this really kind of incredible stonework and various things like that, which are off the coasts of continents, islands, and things. But it's not explained, and I think that that's a very interesting point, right? Because if it were to happen, and I have a strong tendency to believe that it did happen, that there were advanced civilizations in times past, I believe the kind of given date for all these things are about 12.5 to 13.5 thousand years ago, when this great global catastrophe or flooding happened. If there was great upheaval on the earth, that a lot of these coastal towns were buried underwater. And so here we have the evidence of it. There is similar kind of evidence on weathering patterns on the Sphinx in Egypt, for instance, which strongly suggests erosion by rainfall. And we don't have information. We don't have any history of that type of climate stretching back, at least 10,000 years. So it begs the question: if this hasn't happened within our recorded history, then when did it happen? And if these things were created prior to what our current written history is, then when? Right? It could be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14,000 years ago. It could be longer. It could be fairly longer. And I think it all raises very interesting points. And if there was some type of global catastrophe that happened tomorrow, that totally destroyed the 80%, I believe, of population centers are near the coasts, that a 10-foot, 15-foot raise in ocean levels would decimate places like many coastal cities, and especially places like New York and all sorts of great big cities around the globe. I mean, that's I guess raising the sea level 15 feet isn't tiny, but what if it was much more than that, right? It would absolutely wipe out the planet. Especially if it was also including the all sorts of various ecological kind of disasters that could happen. So, given that we have all these ancient structures, don't we have to reconsider what human history is? I mean, isn't it possible that human civilizations on this planet, much like ours, similar to ours, different in many ways, of course, but have existed not just even once before, but maybe dozens of times before on this planet, that human civilizations have risen up to certain technological levels, and only to be cast down again by these huge geologic events, maybe even extraterrestrial events. And by extraterrestrial, I don't mean alien beings or whatever. I'm talking about comets and asteroids, or solar flares, or what have you, which could seriously, I mean, if you can accept that ancient civilizations, human civilizations, did exist on this planet, that were making these structures, then how difficult would it be for that to happen to us? And if it happened once before and it looks like it might happen again, then, well, how many times did it happen, you know? I mean, maybe we can date something back to 25,000 years ago, but that's not really all that long on a geological scale. It could have happened dozens, hundreds of times for all we know. I think it really makes you stop to think about kind of the fragility of this world that we have. I mean, look at the power lines outside your house. I mean, they're metal strings wrapped in plastic up on sticks of wood, which kind of run across, run around the highways, and kind of some of them are underground. And I mean, think how fragile they are. These things are getting ready to fall apart now. In our day, they're just kind of starting to fall apart, and we use them. If there was some gigantic catastrophe, and then 10,000 years went by, and maybe even new ice ages, which do, happen with certain regularity that we can measure, that our scientists have been able to measure. And when these glaciers come rolling across the landscape, I mean, we're talking a mile thick, and plus sheets of ice just grinding everything beneath them to like a fine powder. Where I live right now, in Kansas City, Missouri, is a very fertile place, and the reason for that is because this past ice age saw glaciers moving down through Canada and across the northern part of the United States, and pushed all this topsoil to right about here, where they started to recede, and so it's very fertile here. And that's just the last one, right? But if it's happened once, and we have evidence of it happening many times, it's very likely that it's happened many, many more times beyond what we've really comprehended just yet. And I don't have any answers to this. I'm not educated enough in that field to have all the data. I have done my research in in certain ways, but what were these civilizations like, and what did they know and what did they learn? We found, somewhat recently, we found evidence in the Middle East, and I can't exactly think of where at this very moment. They found like a three-pronged, was it like a brass or a copper plug, which is clearly an electronic device, right? And this is not the first one. They have, the Jerusalem light bulb or whatever, this Dead Sea batteries and stuff, and I've seen a couple of these things. And that's just from our most modern prehistorical evidence. I mean, this could have happened hundreds of times for hundreds of thousands of years. Like I say, I don't have any answers to that, but I do think that it bears consideration that history could be very different than we've been led to believe, than we've ever really known about or had evidence of. Just like I have said just a few minutes ago, we didn't really have scuba gear 100 years ago. I mean, we wouldn't have found these things until we reached a certain level. And if these types of events are happening regularly on the surface of our globe, there may be much more to find. And and this is kind of getting out there, and I really can't source this, but I heard this years ago, that many of the people in Iraq, and this is something actually that I studied at the University of Missouri, because I studied architecture and anthropology. I'm very interested in buildings and societies. Right, it kind of goes together. That prior to not just the most recent invasion of Iraq, but actually, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth here, but the Bush and the first Bush and the Clinton eras, but especially the most recent invasion, that there were a lot of architectural finds being discovered in Iraq. And at the time that I was in college, it was people were really excited about that in the fields of anthropology, um, because they were discovering these cities, these towns that had completely been blown over by sand, essentially, and had been preserved there underneath the surface of the sand, and these were starting to be discovered with new advances in I guess it would be sonar technology, and they were discovering these sites and they were starting to unearth them, and it was very, very exciting to people in those fields. There's tons of discoveries being made, and that all came to a stop. So especially specifically with the most recent Iraq invasions by America, and all the architectural digs had to be put a stop to, and then they're dropping these big megaton bombs everywhere, and which causes the shifting of the ground, and the earth was settling and the sand was settling, really messing up some sites that were kind of in progress. And the scientists, the anthropologists, were especially worried about sites that they hadn't found yet that were being destroyed. And from what I was aware of, I had heard that a lot of the Iraqi people believed that the actual motivation behind these attacks, these invasions and various things, it wasn't even about the oil, and it certainly wasn't about democracy, but that it was because there were these revolutionary discoveries that were happening, which would really challenge the conventional view of history. And just to speculate here, and this is pure speculation, but we've many of us, anyways, I've heard stories about Hitler going after the Spear of Destiny and things like that, and of course the Crusades going down hundreds and hundreds of years before, looking for the Ark of the Covenant and things like this. That this motivation still exists to this day, and that a large part of why these types of invasions and activities were happening was to put a stop to the kind of scientific and global and just kind of societal discoveries of these ancient relics, ancient artifacts, and this kind of ancient knowledge of human history. And from what I understood, from what I had heard, and I had some pretty good professors over there, that this was a widely accepted reason why the people in the Middle East at that time believed that these kind of invasions and bombings were occurring. And I have a tendency to believe that was a very likely part of it, and I think that specifically because I was kind of I was kind of specialized in those fields at that time, and was certainly learning from specialists in those fields. And these were the people that had actually been over there doing the digs, and then had to leave 6 months prior or whatnot. And they said, wow, we had these amazing discoveries, and then all of a sudden we had to stop, and these guys were practically in tears. They're very distraught over what had been, years and decades of work and research for them, which was all brought to an end very abruptly. So, and I heard several of these stories firsthand from people that had been over there, and secondhand from people who were, like professors who were closely related to people that had been over there. So, those weren't the people who were saying that that's the reason for the invasions, but they were saying that was a result. I would not be surprised if there were some amazing discoveries that were challenging the modern viewpoint of history. And so, that's just another little tangent on this kind of ancient human history thing. So, a lot to discover there, a lot to learn. I would definitely suggest people looking up and trying to learn more about, if you're interested in these things. There's a lot to see, a lot of pictures, a lot of kind of layman articles, and then if you want to get more in depth with some of the scientific um, research articles on these topics, they're all out there to find. And I'd absolutely love it if somebody heard this that had never really been interested or even known that these things existed, that wanted to get in there and into the internet and into all these pictures and research and see it for themselves. And if anything I've said is inaccurate, by all means let me know. I'm excited to. I'll say this, and kind of in closing, because I want to wrap this up. I know I'm getting close to my hour here, which I was kind of a timer that I set for myself. But I will say this personally: one of my favorite things in life is to be proven wrong. And I know that sounds really strange to a lot of people, but bear with me here, and I'll explain. It's very simple. If I can be proven wrong, then to my own belief, if you can prove to me and I can now accept with this new knowledge that I've been wrong, then it's really one of the greatest gifts that someone can give me, because that means that something that has kind of built my belief structure has been inaccurate, right? Which means a lot of my other beliefs are going to be inaccurate because they're based off this. Now, if you can show me the evidence, convince me, or even suggest to me that the things that I've known are wrong and I can look that up further myself, then I really have gained the ability to become right. While I had these false ideas, I was never able to be right, and nothing I ever thought that was built off those things could ever be right. But if somebody can come to me and show me that I was wrong and show me how I was wrong, it's very important to me to research them, of course, but then to integrate the new knowledge that I've had into kind of a morphic belief structure that I'm working from. Because obviously none of the things that any human being thinks about is 100% accurate. We simply don't have the perspective, we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the history. We can get close maybe, and we want to get closer and closer, and I believe that's the function of science. So if anybody, disputes these kind of claims that I'm making, or they're really not necessarily claims, but these kind of thought processes that I'm having, and you can, show me something that is true or more true, then you've really given me personally the greatest gift of knowledge that someone can give. Now, if you already agree with me, then great. Maybe we're just super smart and we're right, and but is it even possible for us to be right in that sense? Well, we can be pretty close. Probably, maybe if we're lucky, we might be pretty close. But that doesn't help me per se all that much, other than kind of maybe boosting my self-esteem or whatever, and then, yeah, I'm a really smart guy and I've done good research, or at least I've been intelligent enough to read about the things that people much smarter than me and very dedicated people who have spent whole lifetimes on these little very specific areas have unearthed for me to behold. Einstein said, I've achieved these heights by standing on the shoulders of giants. I would think it was Einstein. I'm standing on the shoulders of a lot of giants. I can't see what all the giants underneath look like, but I believe it was Einstein that said that. So, these are all things just to check out for yourself. And my goal really isn't to convince anybody of most of these things. Rather, it's to kind of express what I've found that was enlightening, shocking, exciting to me, and share that, because I think that's one of the greatest things you can do. One of the nicest things you can do is to really share things that have made your life better. Whether that's an interesting book, or an interesting thinker or an interesting speaker that you've heard, a song that you really love, or a new artist. If you can expose somebody to one of those things that really changed your life, then you've done a good thing. And that's something I can only kind of aspire to, right? And that's where I've started that's why I've begun this podcast, because we've been here for about an hour or so, and it's really just scratching the surface here. I think I've touched on 3 subjects, and I haven't gotten really in depth in any of them. I've really only talked, basic like concepts on 3 topics, but I think any one of these topics could be enlightening to somebody who had never really considered them that way. And by the same token, if somebody has really strong evidence or just opinions or just something to say, and you want to express that to me and change my mind, let me tell you, there's a very good possibility that with some decent evidence that you will change my mind, and I will consider those things. Because to me, that's exciting. To me, that's science. To me, that's not just science, but it's even spirituality. I don't really see these things as separate. Spirituality to me means consciousness, and we can't divorce our science from our consciousness, because obviously we have to perceive them, behold them, consider them, and we do that with our minds, right? And our minds are what makes us conscious. And like I said, I believe that spirituality is really a study of consciousness. So, so I'm open to a lot of crazy ideas. I try to think about everything and really believe nothing, kind of like in Dogma by Kevin Smith. Chris Rock says, as his character says, I think it's better not to have any beliefs. I think it's better to just have ideas. And ideas can morph and change, and that's really what this whole thing is about. I don't have a title for what I'm doing here, but it may be something along those lines, ideas. Because I love to talk about science. I'm very interested in it. I'm also very interested in like the mystical aspect of things too, because I think that these are just perceptions that people have had that haven't been completely understood and scientifically discovered and codified yet, but very well may be. And of course, a lot of it's going to be disproven, and it's just going to be bunk, and it's going to be a lot of smoke up the proverbial ass, as they say, right? But there are reasons and bases behind a lot of people's perceptions, and I want to discover them. So I really appreciate, like, in closing here, appreciate everybody spending this time with me. It means a lot to me. It really does. You might not even know it. I don't even know you, but it still means something to me. And I love the chance to express myself, and I'd absolutely love to hear back from people's opinions and comments on things that I've said. Maybe other topics that people would like to hear about. And I do a lot of research. I learn new things every single day. So if somebody suggests a topic that they think might be interesting and I haven't heard much about, I'll hop right on. You can almost bet your life on the fact that if you tell me about something interesting that I haven't heard much about, that I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna voraciously find it. I'm just gonna dig into it in that moment, probably before you're done speaking or writing. Before I'm done reading the sentence, I'm going to be Googling it, and I'm going to be trying to figure out where the scientists are who know about this and who's experienced it and stuff. So it's my closing here. I've pretty much said it. Thank you for listening, and by all means, enlighten me as to your opinions and your research, and with any luck, I'll see you next time.